Hi, this is Damien from AtHope, and I'm an Axiological Atheist, which can easily be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And I'm here with a guest, Aron. Could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you for people that don't know, and then what kind of atheist you are?
Okay, well, let's see. I don't know if I'm axial.
Well, axiological, and it means value. In other words, like to me, axiology is in a sense a value theory that gives all the meaning to what metaethics is. And metaethics is, in a sense, is how you decide what's a good ethic. And then ethics is more about use. So axiology is like what is the foundation of everything. You start with values. In other words, if I asked you what's good, you would say, well, this is good. And I would have to ask you then, well, why is that good? And then you would give me a justification. In its justification, I would hear your axiology, what you're valuing. And this is real important to me because a value change happens to the God concept itself when you go from being a theist to an atheist. This is a very distinct change. You go from seeing this term, God, as being some kind of a real thing, whether it's a person they're thinking about or it's a spiritual concept. It's still the same thing. They give meaning, depth, quality to something that has no meaning, no depth, and actually no real qualities. So as axiology atheist, I start to look at that concept and go, wait a minute. Oh, we moved way too fast. You said that had meaning, and I forgot to ask you why. Why do you even think that? What do you even mean by the term God? Not even if there could be other gods, but what do you, personally, when you're saying, I believe, what exactly is being encapsulated in that concept? And so that's what, in a sense, axiology starts at the ground level. Doesn't even let you even use the word, and then it just keeps going all along because it's all about what you value and then what should be disvalued. And it's just basically like looking at the good and bad almost, but it sees it more as like a paradigm. It's a whole bunch of pieces. There's some things that are good, better, best, and then most preferable, whatever, of any kind. And the same thing, little bad, most bad, whatever. So to me, it's just a way to understand ethics.
Okay.
So that's just to answer your question. If you think you are that.
Okay. So I would first think that for me, the way you talk about changing from a theist to an atheist, it wasn't quite that for me.
Okay.
So I would say resignation or atheism for me was more of a resignation than a resolve. It was, and I didn't go from theist to atheist either because I had been lied to about what an atheist is, as we often are. I was told my whole life that an atheist is somebody, who knows there is no God. And for the longest time, I would say that it wasn't that I knew that there was no God, that I just wasn't convinced that there was one. And that's what atheism really is. And I found out that that anybody that is not convinced that an actual deity really exists is an atheist. And I have to break that down a bunch too, because when we're talking about an actual deity, because I know a lot of people will say, "Well, I believe there's something."
Yeah, something-ism.
Okay, well, great. Well, we all believe there's something. Is it a God? And then we have to get into what a God is, so magical, anthropomorphic, immortal. I mean, I have to come up with that. And some people want to go by definitional fiat to say that the Abrahamic God is not that. But no, the Abrahamic God is that. He sits on the throne. He lets people look at his feet. He waves his hand, hides his face, shows his backside, cheats at wrestling, right? He ate with Abraham. I mean, he just shows up at the door and he's recognized. And even though the Bible says that nobody can see his face and live, right? Well, it also says that Moses and Abraham and Isaac and Aron and 72 other people all got to see him with their own eyes, and nobody died from it. And there was a couple of people that it says, that they spoke with God face to face. So we're talking about a guy who walks and has a body, and the several parts of the body, or the Bible describe different parts of, or make reference to different parts of God's body, his nose, his hands, and all this, his hair. And they're not talking about Jesus, because We're talking about a book that was written by and for Jewish people that don't believe in Jesus. So they're, and the Jews invented this God, so they're the ones that decide what it is.
Right.
Because Jesus was supposed to be Jewish, right? So he lends credit or credence to the Jewish religion on what they say God is, and Jesus is worshiping and praying to that same person that the Christians then turn around and say, well, no, he's really talking to himself. And I really went off on a tangent there. But what I was told that an atheist is somebody who believes in nothing, as if that means some kind of Zen, as if we're nihilist or something.
One question, one statement though. You said nihilism. So if anyone listening, nihilism would be the exact opposite of axiological. Axiology sees value in the world, understands that humans are the ones that create the value, so it's not a magical thinking. But in a sense, it's the opposite of nihilism, because nihilism looks at the world and says, well, since no one cares, then I don't need to, or I don't think that there is care, or care can be found. Where I see the exact opposite. I'm like, yeah, well, caring happens between these emotional beings, and they're the ones that are creating this need for this bonding that we call, ethics or whatever.
Yeah, there's another misrepresentation, because all of this is stemming from the way that atheism has been misrepresented and deliberately, deceptively mischaracterized by religious people.
True.
And so one of the other things is always characterizing everything as if it's a positive belief, right? So that if I don't believe you, what you're saying, that means that I have a positive belief that you're wrong. Okay, so if you come to something, and let's say in social media, you can like this comment, right?
Right.
What if you don't like that comment? You didn't like that comment, so that means you don't like that comment, right?
Right.
And it's not there's not a other link. It's not like you have to choose which one to click on.
Correct.
Do you like it or do you not like it? And then the agnostics will say, or the people who call themselves agnostics will say, well, I didn't click either one of them. Well, sorry, there was only one. There's only the like.
I totally agree with you. I have this problem.
So either click the like saying that you like it or you don't like it. It's the default position is that you don't like it, right? You can't, the default position on doing something is not doing something. So on the belief of a God, I've actually had atheists tell me that we are born believing everything that it is possible to believe, and then we start shredding or shedding beliefs after that. So everything has to be a positive belief. No.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not that at all. So what I was told, and there's a bit of an irony here that I'm getting to, but what I was told is that an atheist believes in nothing.
That's not true.
Which is why I got that it must be nihilism. But what they really mean by that is does not believe in anything on faith.
No, that's definitely true.
The word belief they use in a different context. So belief for them means make believe. It means pretend. It means choose to believe whatever you want to believe, regardless whether it's true or not. And how many times have you had believers tell you that it doesn't matter to them whether their beliefs are true or not? They only believe in belief. That's what makes them happy, is believing.
Yeah. Well, generally, if when I'm on the street, if I push them far enough in their belief, they come to that, as I agree, almost as their default. That, well, it doesn't matter. I feel good. Like as somehow that I should never challenge something that's false just because you feel good. I mean, that's You're supposed to respect their belief because they believe it. I'm sorry, but if you think that Benjamin Franklin was the first president of the United States, I'm not going to respect that belief. You don't need to. I think is a real problem is people have this default thinking that things have a right to exist. People, living things, have a right to exist. Ideas, no idea has a right to exist. The people that use it give it rights, but it itself has nothing. So the concept of God, it has nothing. You guys are defending something that has no individual right to even exist.
Now, you have to clarify that I was, on the day that I found out or figured out what atheism actually meant all along, and that I'd been lied to about that, I thought that an atheist does not believe in any kind of a supernatural thing at all. Right? So anything that requires faith, an atheist wouldn't believe on, or anything that I guess that anything that can't be proven necessarily would, that an atheist would believe in any of those things. And so then I realized, no, it's just concerning the God concept. Now, as it happened, on the day that I realized that it was actually only talking about God, and that there are plenty of atheists out there in the world who, even though they don't believe in God, they still believe in supernatural woo of some kind.
Sadly.
Well, on the day that I figured out what it was, that was my last day in believing in any kind of a supernatural woo. I didn't go direct from theist to atheist, but I did go through one of those embarrassing neo-pagan stages where I believed in some kind of a different kind of theism. And honestly, if I had read the Tao Te Ching earlier than I actually did, I would have called myself a Taoist. But since I had already seen Star Wars and hadn't read the Tao Te Ching, well, then I was a Jedi.
Yeah.
Jedis
are much more cooler, though.
Yeah. The way, if you take Taoism and combine it with Confucianism, you kind of get Jedi. So, I mean, Lucas based the Jedi Sith religion on the combination of those two philosophies.
Right.
So, it's just easier to call yourself a Jedi, and that actually was my religion. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a parody. I honestly believed that living things had a spiritual energy that animated them. And I mean, a lot of people believe this.
Yeah, they're animists.
Everybody thinks that you have a soul, right? When you die, your soul leaves your body. Well, like the only difference between me and the typical theist belief was that I believed that all life had a spiritual life force. Yeah. And when anything dies, then whatever animated that organism then ebbs out of it in much the same way. This is the way I would describe it. It's like with clay. Clay is only malleable when it's wet, and then when it dries, well, then the clay just goes back to being dirt again. Right. And it's incapable of animation because it's not it no longer has the fluid. The fluid has evaporated out and has become part of the hydrosphere again. So spiritually, I thought that the world was much the same way. That there's a not a biosphere because it means something else now, but there's a universal life force that envelops the earth, just like Obi-Wan Kenobi described. As a matter of fact, in 1977, when I was 14 years old, I heard Obi-Wan say that the force is an energy field surrounding all living things. It's produced by all living things. And it surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds us together. And so, of course, there's this the reason that your cell phone works is because it connects with this energy that's all around it. And then all these other things do that. So, I mean, living energy would be just the same thing. So when something dies, the water or the spirit ebbs out of that, and then you get dirt down here and then water back up here, and then you get this reincarnation. Just say you take a glass of water, and this is you. That's your soul. And then you pour that out into the ocean. Okay, so now you're dead. But now you take that same glass and immediately dunk it right back in. And if you do it really quick, you'll probably get a good amount of what was actually you originally, but it won't be all you. You'll get bits of other entities too, and not just people. You would get the spiritual energy of plants and insects and moss and fungus and things
that sounds like the Asian reincarnation sometimes.
Yeah, well, this is why nobody can remember their past life. Who could remember being a bacteria?
What would that be like? Imagine that, being a bacteria. Wonder how the world would look from that position.
Well, then the amount of life force that you would have to have for a man of your size. Yeah. How many bacteria would you have had to have been at the same time? So you've got all these combined memories now. Yeah. If you could have a memory in any of them at all. But the reason that I believe this was because it's not just that I was stupid or insane, and it wasn't that I had somebody in church drumming this into me every day, but it was that I was raised in a culture that was credulous, that was that taught that only believers could experience awe and wonder that atheists could not.
Oprah thinks that.
Yep. And that atheists, or that they didn't identify them as atheists. Back then they called them skeptics. So anybody that was identified as a skeptic was the same thing as a cynic. It's somebody that that the reason they don't see not just God belief, but all other forms of magic too. The reason they don't believe in astrology, the reason they don't believe in the planet Nibiru, the reason they don't believe in a whole bunch of ghosts and every other foolish thing, Bigfoot, all that, is because skeptics are cynics and they're missing out on the greater joy that only believers can truly see.
Yeah.
Whenever they say they truly see, well, they truly don't see. Because it's a big lie. And it's the way of taking truth and basically taking a lie and marking it as truth with a capital T. For the longest time, I didn't even know really what truth is. And when I finally figured out what truth is, it was a huge thing for me to realize that the truth is what the facts are. How simple is that? The truth is whatever we can show to be true. You can say that something is the truth, but if you can't show it, then it isn't. I
totally agree with that. In fact, I debated this one philosopher, atheist, but he's more of a agnostic. I'd say he has almost like a deist kind of a sort of thinking. But anyways, I was talking to him and I told him it really comes down to one philosophy for me: justificationism. You need to provide a justification or I will not believe it. It's just that simple. And the justification, I'm a rationalist. So I'm welcome rational ideas. If you give me an idea that's really profound and really justified in the sense, I can agree with it. Usually logic. But I mean,
my position is not justificationism.
Yeah.
I remember when I looked up justificationism, it turned out not to be what I thought it was. It's kind of like the logical fallacy of the argument from ignorance. It's not what you think it would be. And the argument, well, I don't know anything about that, so it can't be true. But actually, if you look up what the argument from ignorance is, I cannot not even remember what it is. It's like anything that isn't proven wrong is therefore right, I think.
Well, yeah, but I'm not using it in that context. What I'm saying is, for me, I have a belief etiquette. In other words, everything presented to me has to follow a process of valid and reliable offering. So if it's not,
the beliefs have to be. If you're going to make a statement, if you're going to assert, well, let me put it a different way. And this is the way I always phrase it. You cannot assert empty, baseless speculation as though it were verifiable fact.
True.
Because that's a lie.
True.
Pretending to know things you don't know, or that no one even can know, is a lie.
True.
And you'll know. And another explanation behind that, like citing facts that are not facts. If you're going to state it as a fact, then it has to be objectively verifiable. If it's not objectively verifiable, then you don't get to say that it's a fact. So what does religion do? Religious people sit there and say, I know for a fact that No, you don't know it, and it's not a fact. So both of those things are lies. And so that's the biggest irritant that I get with that. And I forget what other tangent I was going to go on with this. But you have to be able to justify any kind of a truth claim. You have to be able to show.
And that's what I'm saying. If I use it in that context, I don't always get into how people use the depths of philosophy. And just like I use the word ontology a lot. I use it in my way. There's all kinds of ways that people use it. But I'm just saying that I try to show people, I'm just saying, like you were saying, that everything you offer me, you have to be justified. I'm not going to I believe it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Those are not acceptable. No, that's not a valid or reliable justification. The reason why I wanted to bring into that in point, because once I started looking, I agree with you. When I first became an atheist in college, I never knew an atheist. I never read an atheist thing. I probably had atheist friends, but they never told me they were atheists. Or I didn't meet anyone I knew was atheist. I was raised in a religious cult, so I didn't even have a mindset. I didn't even watch TV till 13 practically. So I had no real understanding of the world. When I went to college, I became an atheist. And the fact that once I was presented the evidence, like you're talking about, the facts, the archaeology, how it didn't match up, it started blowing me away. And then seeing all the religions and all the same, I started seeing, and they all talk nonsense and they all don't have any justification. And so, and then once they talked about the devil, and they showed in the class, and it wasn't even to debunk Christianity, but it might as well have been. It was just understanding the Bible in college. But they talked about how the devil and Lucifer, Satan, the serpent, all different, in a sense, beings in the Bible, and showed it. Once I saw that, I just immediately got like a hot flash, almost like a born again, because what it was really is the cognitive dissonance left, the denial was gone, and I just blatantly saw this is false.
Yeah. So I've been arguing with believers mostly online, but also face to face and so forth, and doing debates and whatnot for 20 years at least, actively. I mean, to the point where I'm investing a really unhealthy amount of my time doing this, so that it has become something of an obsession. Roughly 20 years ago, and I just really jumped whole hog into it. However, because as a result of that, I can't really switch my definitions around.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, well, when I say faith, I mean, well, I can't just say, okay, well, that guy says faith, so it means something in that case. Mm-hmm. Only when he's speaking does faith have this different definition.
Right.
And this other person thinks that this other word means this other thing only to him, but not to anybody else. And so I have to make sure that the words that I'm using, and people are very upset, the people that I argue with are very upset that I won't let them redefine things.
Right.
Because that's the crux of so many of their arguments. They have to redefine things into an absurd way, so that, like the definition of God that I often see, and the definition of God as a creator being from which who maintains everything. Really? So that definition that you made up for yourself is how you're going to excuse Apollo or Hecate? Because, I mean, they're gods, right?
Quetzalcoatl.
They were worshipped by millions of people for thousands of years, and you're going to, by definitional fiat, simply remove them. So, I mean, all of the Hindu gods, so like 1 million Hindu gods, right? Even the good, even the best Hindu gods, except for maybe, Krishna or Brahma, those two maybe will remain. But by your definition, every other one dissipates. So every religion becomes invalid simply because you've made up a definition that is unjustified. But when I look at, I can't arbitrarily eliminate everybody else's gods. I mean, there's hundreds of gods, right, worshipped by millions of people for thousands of years, and we all understand that, Zeus and Hera and Apollo and these are all gods, right? And Thor is a god, and so is Odin, and they aren't all creator gods, so they don't all fit your definition. But then we have to look at all the qualities that actually adhere to all of them. So they are all magical, anthropomorphic, immortals. Now that doesn't mean that every magical, anthropomorphic, immortal is necessarily a god, but it can be, because it can be in that category. As a matter of fact, there's a TV series that just came out, which is extremely good, based on a Neil Gaiman book, which was also extremely good, American Gods. We had the audio version. It was very well presented, and the TV show is quite good too, though it follows a different story. What Neil Gaiman did was he took all the magical, anthropomorphic immortals and classified them all as gods. So they're not deity. There'd be like some sort of subclass, but leprechauns and all of these other things, they all go into that same category.
Which is actually true, probably. They should be in the same category.
I thought it was brilliant the way he did that. So the definition, magical, anthropomorphic, immortal, and then somebody will say that there are gods that can be killed, or there are gods that have been killed. And I'm like, yes, there have. And did you ever see the movie Highlander? Because a bunch of those guys got killed too. But they don't die of cancer, do they?
No.
Well,
doesn't it also take another immortal usually to kill them? They're not killed by humans that I know of. Do you know of a god that's killed by humans?
You have to know how to kill an immortal.
Yeah.
So, but when people don't want to understand, I find that they're very good at not understanding, especially when they become addicted to a religious belief. And that's exactly what I think religion is, more than anything else. I mean, a lot of people want to associate it with insanity or as a pathogen. And religion is certainly an enabler. If you already have issues dealing with dementia or some other similar actual mental problem, your religious environment, because so many of them here in the United States especially encourage these, it's like with the occult too. And this is where I said I went into this neo-pagan sort of a thing, and it didn't help. It was the same thing as what mainstream religion does. It just it does it privately with different names. But they encourage you to do this meditation and to see just beyond what your eyes can see, which means make shit up. It's just that when you're practicing a religion, you don't realize you're just making shit up to fool yourself. You fooled yourself so much that you think you're actually seeing an aura.
Yeah.
Or that you're actually hearing the voice of God. You're hearing whatever you already wanted to hear and then deciding it was God after the fact.
Do you think that maybe some agnostics are doing that too? Because I'm a anti-agnostic. I'm against that concept. That doesn't make logical sense to me. But beyond that, I'm not against the people, so I have nothing wrong with the people. But the idea that agnosticism is even to me valuable, I just see it as either atheism or theism. You're just not sure. To me, what do you think?
I understand that Huxley, who invented the word agnosticism, first of all, he didn't accurately understand what Gnosticism is. So there's the first problem with the etymology. So he comes up with agnosticism, which is the reverse of something it's not the reverse of.
Exactly.
But he makes it that. And so modern agnostics who love Huxley follow his mistake here. And they're saying, well, this is you can't know either way. Well, okay, fine. You can't know either way because that's what Gnosticism is, right? That's when you profess your beliefs as if they're not merely beliefs, as if you know.
That sounds better.
Okay, that's what Gnosticism is. It's where you assert your belief as if it were knowledge, which is the most irritating thing about all religion, and that's where this came from. But now agnosticism is saying that you don't know. Okay, well, fine. You don't know if a God exists. Doesn't sound like you're convinced there is one either. So I couldn't actually put you in the belief category, now can I?
Exactly.
There are theists who are agnostic. Who say,
I do agree with that too.
Who's to say whether there's a God or not, or who that God is, but I'm convinced that there's some kind of spiritual thing I'm going to call a God. So there are very few agnostic theists. And most atheists are agnostic in that we accept that, hey, if there was a supernatural thing, then how could we know anything about it, especially when it's so determined to remain hidden?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, if magic really existed, and yes, supernatural things are magic, whatever religious believers want to say, well, no, magic is just what an illusionist does on stage. Well, if that's the case, then why do the illusionists call themselves illusionists?
Exactly.
When
or magicians. If it's not about magic.
When the genies, right, in the old folklore are granting their wishes and whatnot, are they pulling rabbits out of hats? Do they have like the cards stuffed in their sleeves? I mean, is that an illusion that the genie is doing? In all of our folklore, where any kind of a magical conjuration or whatever happens, it's never stage magic. Gandalf wasn't pulling cards out of his sleeve. Right? Was Gandalf, creating light with his staff, or was he creating the illusion of light with his staff? Can there even be an illusion of light that isn't light?
That's funny. The illusion of light. Maybe on cartoon.
They'll misrepresent it however they can because they can't allow themselves to admit that they believe in magic.
And why do you think that is?
Because they want to pretend that it's real. And when I say they want to pretend, I mean that absolutely literally. They want to pretend. I've had people tell me that they know, not just that they don't know that God is real, but they want to believe that he is anyway. That happens all the time. But I've had people tell me that they know that God is not real, but they're going to believe he is anyway.
Yeah. Because
it makes them feel good. So what the hell is that? Now, see, to me, and when you mentioned philosophy before, and you said you wanted verification.
Yeah.
And I would caution you against using verificationism, because look it up. The philosophers will nail you that they have a different definition for that.
I can take on philosophers. Anyone who's a philosopher listening wants to take me on, I'm here. I'm an autodidact. I learned philosophy all on my own. I never studied any of the philosophers, but I understand the concepts and use them in a way that they're not probably ready for.
I've had to deal with philosophers more times than I would like, and I do have some friends who don't necessarily share opinions with me, but can instruct me in philosophy or keep me on a keel. Because it doesn't make any sense to assume that, okay, well, this person has studied this their whole life, and I've never studied it at all, so I know more than he does. So I know better than to do that. But anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, looking for justification. Okay, truth, right? So that's what matters, right? So my philosophy on this is that the only value any information can have is however accurate you can show it to be, right? And so if you can't show that it is accurate at all, then that information has no value at all.
Then you're an axiologist. You just explained it. That's how you do the thinking. You look at it and then you appraise and you value judge, and then after you value judge, you understand use. In other words, that has no value, no use.
Right, and as the way Matt Dillahunty puts it, I want to believe as many true things as possible, right? Which I don't really like that part of the phrasing, but it does. That's kind of how you would have to word it if you want to increase your knowledge. You're going to have to, you're going to have to adopt new ideas that are true if you want to make sure that they are true, right? And you want to believe as few false things as possible. So you're aware, and this is important too. You have to be aware that you've got to be wrong about something somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And
speaking of philosophy of that, I believe in fallibilism. That in a sense, all human stuff is going to have error. It's like morality. The thought that someone does morality 100% of the time, 100% correct, is laughable. Yeah, right. I don't care who you are. We are the default position is put into a very, human being that is fallible, very fallible. Our minds are fallible. So yeah. So to me, I agree. We always have to be. I'm a rationalist. Reason is my only master. It has to make sense. And to me, something that can't make sense unless it has the qualities that enrich it. It's evidence. It's, justification towards logic. I mean, it has to have something. Or to me, I just what are you talking about?
Yeah, so when believers tell me their wispy little belief that makes them happy and they smile and their eyes light up as they tell me this load of mythology that I couldn't possibly care less about. And it's not just that you can't prove that it's right. You can also prove that most of it is wrong, right? I mean, science is concerned only with what is supported by evidence and what is not supported, and whatever is not supported doesn't warrant serious consideration. Come back when you've got something to show.
True.
Right? When people want to come say, well, maybe a god did it. Okay, well, maybe it was a magic juju bug. Maybe it was some other thing but if we could never test it, if we can never show that speculation is right or wrong, then whatever you've asserted, doesn't matter how beautiful you think it is. But if you can't show that it is either right or wrong, there's no way to falsify it. If it is wrong, there's no hypothesis that could confirm that, hey, you might be onto something here. If you can't go either way, we're done. What you've just said means nothing. It has no value.
That's right.
So, I mean, I don't understand how other people, and I understand that this is a failing that I have. I can't put myself in other people's shoes where they cherish some belief, especially to the degree that you'll tell me that that it's not really true, but you're going to believe it anyway.
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah, I don't relate to that at all.
It seems to me that the division is between people who have a desperate, deep-seated emotional need to believe versus those who actually have only a desire to understand.
So what do you think we can do to get to them? I know you do a lot of stuff. What do you think, or what have you seen work with people like that, or do you feel that it's not hopeful?
The thing that I wish that I could impart on believers that they just don't care about is that you can't make a statement of fact if you can't back it up. Because that's not truth. You can't just call it truth if it's not truth, because that's a lie.
All right.
Right? I wish that they understood that a statement or a claim that is unsupported has no more value than a statement that has already been disproved. An unsupported claim and a disproved claim have the same value.
As me as an axiologist, I would say a disproved thing has less. Because you've actually now become, because to me, I agree with you in the fact that they both don't have value, but now the one has disvalue. I know that it actually, to promote this that I know is false. Like you said, in other words, when I would mean by this, but when Darwin came out with this theory, the creationism at that point had lost value. But I do think that once science found enough, of the actual, artifacts, bones, whatever, DNA, all the other stuff that it supports, evolution being true. Now this is not just wrong. We know it's 100% wrong, and I agree with you. It would be even unethical and a violation of human rights to promote such a toxic, provenly false idea to me.
Okay, so we have the statement that's false, and we proved that it's false, and then we have the other statement that you can't prove that it's false, and so they want to assert that that is true.
Right.
But again, if you can't show that there's any truth to it, you can't call it truth.
No, I agree.
It is. You can't show me the truth of it, right? So think about it. Every claim any religion makes, and none of them can show that they have any truth to them at all. So now they want you to entertain because it hasn't been proven wrong. That means it's possible. This is another logical fallacy.
Some things are not possible. Exactly.
Does not mean it's possible, because in order for a scientist to say that anything is possible, you can't just say that everything is possible, because it's not. There's a cow cannot jump over the moon. That is not possible. You can't either.
Exactly.
Neither can I.
I can barely jump.
Demonstrate this. And it's not just that the probability is very low. No, the bone strength and muscle strength in our legs versus our weight versus the escape velocity. No, these are mathematical impossibilities. There are many things that are impossible. In order for a scientist to say that anything is possible, they have to have some precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such a possibility exists. So, a disembodied mind exists absent the brain that created it, that exists outside of our reality, which means it does not exist in reality.
I totally agree.
and which exists beyond time, which means there's no time in which it exists. And which makes wishes
That's
come
funny
true,
when you say it like that.
literally, by dreaming them up.
Yeah.
You want to show me that there's a possibility there? There's not a remote possibility to any part of that. And what are you basing it on? You're basing it on a complete misunderstanding of primitive fables. You don't have the Word of God. I'm so irritated with this. The Bible is not the Word of God. The Bible is the word of ignorant, bigoted, primitive savages who were superstitious and made up excuses for shit they didn't understand, and who used their pretended to speak for God and then used that assumed authority to justify inhumanity against their neighbors. It is, the religion is, and the Bible is exactly the opposite of what folk pretend to be.
Yeah, and I think that's real important. They don't understand the context of the archaeology that shows that all that's true. That we know that they didn't weren't slaves in Egypt, and that half of them left, or all of them left, or any amount. That it was substantial, because as you said before in a video, Egypt didn't all of a sudden lose its workforce and then have this. Because imagine if millions of people left the United States, our workforce, we would lose all kinds of stuff. You would notice it, and you don't notice anything in archaeology. It's like that. It's not even never. So this thing that happened, if nothing was affected. That is ridiculous. If you have that much of your slave workforce just leave.
If you are concerned with the truth, if you want to make sure that the things that you accept are actually true, and that there's a criteria before you believe something, that you have to be able to verify that this bears out, this seems most likely correct. I'm gonna buy this until we can show otherwise. Right now it seems like this is right, and I'm gonna follow that. If you care about truth rather than just make believe whatever you want to pretend, which is what religion honestly is,
right? Then,
if you read through the Bible, you're not going to read it in the Spirit, where you force yourself to believe all this poppycock. What you will notice, though, is references to the breath of life, right? from the front of the book to the back of the book, every time it mentions the breath of life, it equates it to spirit. So these people wrote this book at a time or at a place where they didn't understand that air was particulate matter.
Right.
But they knew that you would die if you couldn't breathe.
Which was hard to figure out.
They make all these references throughout the book that when Jesus gives up the ghost in one version, it's breathed his last in another version. And my favorite passage out of the whole Bible is Ecclesiastes 3:18-21. It's also the only word of wisdom that I can get out of the entire Bible. And that's where they basically write that, who knows whether there's a heaven or hell. Just shut up and go deal with your life. That's the only wisdom in the entire book. But in that passage also, it says, who can distinguish men from beasts? Men are animals. And that it is vanity to say otherwise. Because who knows whether the breath of man ascends to heaven or the breath of the beast descends into the earth. Which is, it used to be that everybody believed, believe that everything that dies goes into the earth. And this may be in large part due to fossils. So fossils are stone impressions of living things. Now, if you recognize that, if you recognize this is a once living thing, it's clearly dead because it's bones or whatever, but I'm looking at a skull maybe, and it's rock, not bone. What's that mean? Well, we have all these different legends about different things that could turn you into stone, but then just being dead, it means you're in the underworld, under the ground, right? You die, this is what happens. You become one of these rocks. You become a dead thing. This was the common belief. So they had this idea that, that breath made you alive, and that, like, if there's a Hebrew tradition for performing partial birth abortions, for example, and they talk about how the fetus or the baby or the infant, whatever stage it's in, is not considered a living being until it takes its first breath, and in taking the first breath, it becomes infused with the spirit.
Really?
Think that air
I forgot about
is
that.
spirit. So, let's look at some spiritual things here. We talk about people that live in the desert. We talk about people like Moses goes to talk with God, and at one point, God descends in the form of a column of cloud. The hell is a column of cloud that descends to talk to Moses? So Moses is talking to a dust devil, which are common in the desert. Yes. And what is a dust devil? It's where the wind churns up and rips up your tents and everything like that. I mean,
so you're saying that they were thinking that that God's spirit was that air doing that.
Exactly. That the whole spiritual world, all of it is based on a misunderstanding of what air is. So the reason that people think that they have a soul turns out to be because they didn't know what air was. Now, I thought that people had a soul because of this. I was fooled in my childhood. I was raised by credulous people who taught that you should just believe everything that you're told. And they showed me pseudoscience documentaries and stuff. I mean, one of my family gave me a book by Zechariah Sitchin or
Ancient Aliens,
Daniken, Chariots of the Gods. And this is the shit in 1970s that everybody believed in Bigfoot, everybody believed in the Loch Ness Monster, everybody believed in the extraterrestrials that are coming and probing people in the trailer park. And you're just expected to just buy all this stuff, right? I can't even watch X-Files reruns because I'm so irritated at this. But what got me, as I was a little kid, I was 12 years old, and I saw this thing on Kirlian Photography on a show called In Search Of, and I'm so angry that I saw it because it messed with my whole life. Because I thought I was looking at something real. I'm looking at what I think is a science documentary, and so they show this experiment where they take a leaf and they put it between two photoelectric plates. You run the charge through it, and what you get is an image of a leaf where you can see all the details of the leaf, the veins in the leaf and everything, but they're in tiny phosphorescent blue sparks. So it's an image of a leaf.
I've seen that, yeah,
made out of these little tiny phosphorescent blue sparks. The thing is, that part's real, and here's where they faked it to mess with little kids like me and cause us to become Jedis and believe in horse shit for the rest of our life. They take this leaf and they cut it in half, and then they photographed it again. Now, in the way they superimposed and faked the photographs, they show that originally you only get the half the leaf you would expect to see. But then they said on an overexposure, you get the whole leaf. And that, of course...
Oh, like it has a spirit part of the leaf? Is that what you're talking
exactly.
about? Oh.
So, there would be this moment of residual location for that life force. You cut the leaf in half, the life force is still there.
I see what you're saying. That's messed up.
And so, I mean, how am I supposed to account for this scientific data? Because this is what I'm thinking as a little boy. I'm thinking that this is actual scientific data. There's got to be an explanation. The only explanation there could be is that leaf has life force in it, and that of course means that trees have life force in it, and it isn't just people who have souls. It's all life would have this spiritual energy. So, of course, after seeing that, then I see Obi-Wan, and I'm like, ha! And then I've bought into this whole ridiculous thing. Now, the thing is, many, many years later, the only thing I've got left to hold on to is I've had a number of spiritual experiences. I was a neo-pagan occultist for a while. I have had paranormal encounters that blow the doors off of any Christian I've ever heard of, except one. I did meet one Christian who insisted that he went up into orbit in Satan's spaceship.
Oh, that's funny as hell.
Yeah, I do remember that guy. He had a more impressive experience or drug trip than I did. I, however, was sober. just using transcendental meditation, it's so easy to fool the mind. And then I noticed this is what I was doing. I was not showing anybody anything they didn't already believe. I could make you see and hear and feel whatever you already wanted to see and hear and feel. I just had to create the ambiance. And sometimes, depending on what it is, sometimes that ambiance can be charms and medallions. Sometimes it can be firelight and drums.
Do you think that's almost like a hypnosis?
Huh?
Do you think it's almost like a chosen hypnosis? It's like, I want to get it. Yeah. I want to feel it. So then all of a sudden, it's wow.
Exactly like that. It's exactly like that. You're just giving a positive feedback loop to enhance their imagination. But if it were real, if what I was doing was real, then I would be able to take a Christian and show them a different spiritual entity, proving that their original belief was wrong. I'd be able to, but Hindus meet Krishna, not Christ.
Right.
And that's the way that works. So it's whatever you already wanted to believe. And so when I realized that I'm really just creating a feedback for their auto-hypnosis effect, I realized a moment later that I was doing the same thing to myself. And I didn't realize, guys, I had all these different things where I could build up energy and I could actually feel the energy in my hands and see it. I had all these spiritual abilities, and then I realized how these were all illusions and how I had managed to psych myself into believing them all. And it's no different than what the Christians do, except that it's just different names. And so it made it a little easier for me to identify. When you are in a culture of tens of millions of people who buy into the same bullshit, you might never recognize that that's what it is. When everybody in your state and federal government is part of that same cult, you're not going to notice. When all of your mentors and teachers and every superior you ever had buys into that same thing too, everybody's smarter than you, believes this horseshit, you're going to think there's some credence to that horseshit. So I had a huge advantage by being in this little, this occult thing where I didn't have any famous people that I could look at that other people would say, well, if this person believes it, then there must be something to it. No, I didn't have that, which was very fortunate for me. But I still clung to that Kirlian photography experiment. And I realized that all of my paranormal experiences didn't really happen because they couldn't have happened, even though I still remembered them. I remember seeing and experiencing these things. I now know that it wasn't real.
Right.
Somehow none of that was real. And then many years later, and this was like around Y2K, is when I'm on the internet, and it occurs to me that I haven't heard anything about Kirlian photography in a really long time. Why don't I just look up and see what new breakthroughs they've had? Yeah, and right away I find out that the only thing there ever was about Kirlian photography was that one episode of In Search Of. And the very first thing that I find about it is where Leonard Nimoy, who was the host of the show,
Right.
is fucking Spock.
Yeah.
Right? So everything he said sounded logical. That's another thing, that they did to me. Him and the writers admitting casually, like it's not even a thing, that they made up all this shit just for entertainment purposes.
I think that's seriously unethical.
Now, they don't even know they've done anything wrong. We were just kidding. But I thought it was real. I bought it.
I used to think ghosts were real when I first became an atheist because of all the ghost shows. How could there possibly be ghost shows if there's no ghosts? I mean, I know that's not a good reason now, but at the time...
How can they have 5 episodes of ghost shows where they never find anything?
I thought, and they go, oh, this evidence, and I was like wanting to... But how I got out of it is I went in Savannah, and I went to a haunted house on Halloween at night, and they said, do not call them names, do not do this. So I told them, fuck you, you're, whatever bad things I could think of, you're worthless, take me. I challenged them. I said everything, nothing. Went all alone because I said, don't be alone. I went to a dark corner all alone and tried everything I could. Nothing happened. And I go, okay, I thought probably this is not true. Wasn't totally sure. Kind of was, but now I'm done. Now I'm sure this is I tried. I paid the money. I went to the place. I wanted to know, like you said about seeking, and I think that it's really important to me that you offer so much facts to go against it. Like you, and I'm really into archaeology and anthropology and prehistory and history. I love how you put that in. When did you start doing that, and when did you start realizing it was effective?
I got into this argument kind of accidentally. I found myself in a job where I had unrestricted access to the internet all the time, and I had unlimited overtime. So I get 12 hours a day at this job, and I needed to get as many hours as I could. It was an easy job where it's one of those call center kind of things where it's the same thing over and over and over again, and there's no demands. Right. So you've done the same call 10,000 times already, and you're still looking at your screen. You don't even need to change your screen. So I'm still reading whatever it is. I'm like, okay, we'll turn the computer off, turn it on again. That sort of thing. So that's how easy that was. But I got myself on a huge learning curve during that, especially when I ended up on the night shift, because then it would go for hours with no calls. Mm. And so all I'm doing is reading all day, every day, or all night in this case, but it went on for a number of years.
Wow.
So I found myself on Usenet, and the people that I was talking with on Usenet were people that are famous now in the atheist movement. They were just, Dr. Whatever back then, but, and there was a number of these people that I have since met in real life at atheist conferences and such. But I would be talking to the experts in science on one side, and it was like in Usenet, you could post your comments out, or you post your question out, and watch how both sides would answer them, and both sides would be able to see the other person's response as well. So the leaders in theology, or the people with degrees, THDs as they call them, they would answer the question, and the scientists would come in and correct that answer. And it wasn't long before I would just start arguments online and watch how they would deal with the arguments. And it's easy to see who's really got the goods and who doesn't. And I was constantly being referred to go read this, or go compare this to that, and something. So I did. So I found myself in a number of years I read all kinds of scientific articles, and I also read a whole lot of the early mythologies and comparative mythologies, the Bhagavad Gita, the Avestas of Zarathustra. Somehow I never got around to reading the Quran, which I still need to get about to doing. But I read all this other stuff, and for years, as I said, on this constant learning curve, and then you end up getting the same arguments over and over and over again. So I noticed that people are going to tell me there's no transitional species, there's no beneficial mutations. And okay, so now I have a list of these, and instead of writing it all over again, I'm just copying and pasting the same thing.
Yeah.
So when YouTube comes out, I've got all these arguments that I've had the same argument 10,000 times already. So I'll just bottle all these up and make an individual video for each one of these. So, you know, here's the 9th foundational falsehood of creationism. You know, the claim that there's no transitional species. Here's 300 or 400 transitional species. Shut up. And then,
Right.
and that video series kind of took off, and it later became a book.
Yeah, I bought your book.
You've got the book.
Yeah, and I also remember
Yeah,
I wrote a thing about, I gave it 5 stars, and I wrote about things I liked. The 2 things that really touched out to me is that you're not agnostic, which of course I like because I'm not either, and I feel like too much in the atheist movement, especially skeptics, like to say that everyone has to be that, and that anyone that's not is not a thinker. I'm like, really? Because I know several, including myself, that would not agree with that.
Yeah, and I've often said that an agnostic, you know, the agnostics claim that they don't know. You know, and I'll agree, the agnostic is someone who doesn't know that he's atheist. Because, I mean, and the reason I identify as atheist is because of that lie that I was fed. Now, the irony is that I was told that atheists dismiss even the possibility of God. I now realize God was never a possibility.
Yes.
Okay, and you know that atheists know there is no God. I've invested 20 years of my life in studying this. I now not only do I lack sufficient reason to believe there is a God,
Right.
I have sufficient reason to believe there is not a God.
Yes.
Okay, and I can justify that position. I know there is no God in the same way and to the same degree for the same reasons that I know that there are no leprechauns. Well, and everybody will tell you that they know that there's no leprechauns, and it's good enough. Religious believers have told me that they know that there's no leprechauns simply because there's no evidence of them. And then we can go into the additional stuff like, well, how about the fact that leprechauns are impossible?
Yeah.
That they're physically impossible for these, you know, this list of reasons. Same with your God, right? And we can just continue on about that. But the thing is,
that point about leprechauns, I had someone tell me that anything is possible, Damien. You have to be open. I said, listen, reality is not an anything is possible game. Like, I can't have right now the Nile River in my pocket. That's an impossibility. And if I were to make that claim, you don't need to look in my pocket, do you? You don't need to see if there's water dripping down my pants. You know that the claim that I just made is not possible in reality.
Yeah. Yeah. But the irony is that so many of the things that I was told that an atheist was, that I rejected because I thought it was an unreasonable position. And that's why it was cast that way. It was because it was going to sound unreasonable. At this stage in my life, I realize that reason has led me to that very position where it's no longer, and I was justified in being an atheist for like 15 years of my life before I found out what an atheist was. I called myself an agnostic pagan for Christ. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, it was the amount of study that led me from simply not having the evidence to be convinced that there is a God to now being convinced that there isn't a God.
Right.
And it's not an unreasonable position. I got here through reason. And I have solid reasons I can defend for how I am in this position. I'm certainly not going to entertain the possibility of leprechauns.
Yes.
If my neighbors tell me that somebody's rummaging around their trash at night and they think it's leprechauns,
that's funny.
I may go investigate expecting to find raccoons or possums, but there is not going to be a leprechaun. And I will grant, the possibility of happening across a leprechaun is exactly identical to happening across God.
That's right. but so when you do offer the facts and evidence, have you ever seen it actually change people right then or not?
It has happened. But it's not something that's easy to admit. I mean, for most people, I think I can now name two instances of where somebody just instant changes. One of them is Ricky Gervais, who tells the famous story about how he was an atheist in a few seconds just based on something he accidentally heard his mother and brother say to each other in a moment, and then realized they're trying to keep him from knowing that there is no God. He went from believing in God to not believing in God in a moment at 8 years old.
Wow.
There's one other person who told me that they encountered something similar where there was an immediate change. Maybe early enough in life that can happen, but for most people, it's a slow process.
Right.
For myself, going from the moment that I abruptly dropped out of Christianity and rejected God within a day. I mean, all versions of God. I actually considered, now that I'm not Christian anymore, because I couldn't be, what about other ideas of God? Maybe, and eventually, really quickly, I just had to give up the whole God concept. But because of the pseudoscience that I'd been fed in my youth, I was convinced I had scientific data for a spiritual afterlife of some kind. So, based on that misinformation, I continued to believe for a number of years, just not in a God. And you know what? I rambled on so long and got
no. I like what you said, because I was going to say I felt the same way. Like I said, I used to, in fact, when I first started, I called myself a spiritual atheist because I also thought that word had meaning, which now I don't even think it does. Other than feelings, I mean, are you talking about feelings? If you're talking about how we in ourselves live in our phenomenology and then we see through that, yeah, I agree. If you're talking about something magic, I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I was a spiritual atheist. Like I said, the ghost thing, and then I was done. I stopped going, why even use the word? Because if the ghosts are not real, then what else is this word meaning? For me, I kept taking
but spiritual.
Yeah,
the fuck is that?
I started thinking, well, if I'm an honest person, I was really trying to be, and I was challenging other people. If I need to challenge myself, what does that even mean? I'm like, well, I think it means ethics or something, but why don't I just use that?
My daughter went through a similar problem where she was going to reject all religious belief, except that she had been duped into believing that that some claim that when a body is on some kind of a weigh scale at the moment that it dies.
That lie, yeah.
You know, and so there's this tiny increment that it gets lighter or whatever. And it's not like there was ever actually studies done on this. It's not like it happened more than once.
One quack job, the lying.
Yeah. So I mean, how many times are you going to put somebody who's close to death, put them on a scale to weigh them at the moment that they die? I mean, this is not scientific research, right? And even if they did do that, even if they did do concentrated studies like that, souls, being supernatural, would not weigh anything.
No.
You have to have mass. It has to be particulate matter in order to have weight.
Well, even that, if it did have weight, we would be able to find it with science in the body somewhere, if it was that kind of a thing. I mean,
so my daughter was holding to a religious belief based entirely on that piece of misinformation. So I had to have a very careful talk with my daughter, just momentarily, just to shed with her and say, there's no truth to this claim at all. And I had to put that very delicately, but that's the gist of the message. And she's a hardcore atheist now.
Speaking of you doing it in a nice way, I would say that I really like your style and the fact that you really support and promote humanism. I value kindness. I'm not naturally a very kind person. I really try to be. I'm more aggressive and angry and violent. But I'm trying to live a different life. For like about last 20 years I've been trying, and I have gotten better. But I really admire you. In fact, you're one of the people that's made me on the path of even being a more kind firebrand atheist. Because I went to a convention, I don't know, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and I met you and at a humanist convention. And I was talking to you, and I'm doing what I always do, talking loud, being aggressive, and you said, "Why are we yelling?" And my wife had, for 5 years, 10 years, or that I've known her, or whatever, has always said that I'm too loud and all this. But it's hard, because when you're in yourself, in a sense, it doesn't feel that way to me. I feel like I'm just being normal. Everybody else seems to have a problem with how my volume and stuff. But I realized when you said that, okay, my wife is right. You're right. I need to listen to people. My problem I need to stop being so self-focused. And I really wanted to say I appreciated you doing that. And I didn't take it as a bad thing. I took it as that you were caring that I should do it in a better way. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I should do it.
Yeah, I've had that same thing where, you know, there's a couple of people that have addressed me in the same way. You know, dude, put a leash on. You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, like, you know, I'm from the ghetto, man. I'm from Southern California. I've been, you know, shot at, stabbed. I've lived a very aggressive, violent life, and that's of my past. I don't drink alcohol now because I was an alcoholic. My liver failed. I mean, at 17, I was dying of liver failure.
Wow.
I mean, I had crack addict, and my heart stopped at 15. I'm from the streets. I am rough and tough and whatever, but that's not now. But now I realize how much kindness matters. But you are one that really, I would say, shocked me into realizing, okay, I need to change. My wife had already been hounding me, so she's right, and I'm apologizing to everybody in the public that I should have listened to my wife to begin with. But I do appreciate that you in a sense telling me that. I really took it as a form of kindness because you cared enough to help me be better.
Well, I was, when that happened, I was fresh from receiving that message myself.
Well, you know what?
I was raised in an environment of kind of toxic masculinity, where guys are not allowed to cry,
Right.
not allowed to show pain, you know, and where you know, boys be drinking at 11, you know, or younger, and you just had to be tough all the time. And so I get that, and if I was accused of being a humanist as a little boy, I think about 11, and only because I was talking about, I don't remember what I was talking about, but this person, clearly I was not reciting the doctrine that I was expected to recite. And so she said with a sneer, I was a humanist. And she said it the same kind of distasteful way that you were required to say the word socialist.
I like both.
Yeah, so you have to, I was raised that you have to say both of those words as if they taste bad. Or someone might think that you agree with those things. And nobody even knows what socialism is, because I was a little kid and I asked, what's the difference between socialism and communism? And the only answer I ever got, honestly, was, they're both just as bad.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell me what either one of them is.
Well, I see socialism as the workers own the rights of production. I see communism as the version of that becomes totalitarianism to me. I am an anarcho-socialist. I believe in libertarian socialism or whatever. But to me, that communism, to me personally, is just a version that takes that further and says that all of a sudden everyone has to share. Not just that everyone is available for sharing, which I like, but it becomes more of a force. But I agree, most people don't know what those words are and use them incorrectly.
One thing we can say about socialism and communism is that socialism has at least, as a political experiment, has at least worked a few times.
Right.
Whereas communism has so far failed every time.
Yeah. It's totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Only thing is, it's totalitarian of the masses instead of totalitarian of a king. It's like, okay, well, why don't see which either of those is good for me? I see oppression and oppression. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, and of course, there's huge problems with capitalism too.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And runaway democracy as well. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. I mean, I looked into what humanism was when I was accused of being a humanist.
Right.
And when I found that humanism was the practice of finding human solutions rather than supernatural solutions, right? And secular politics, secular policies rather, right? So that,
could you explain that for people that don't know?
So people rely on themselves to solve their own problems, and they make laws that are not respecting different religions or promoting religion, but are applicable to everybody.
Right.
So that, just because you claim to belong to this special religion doesn't give you special privileges. You don't get to smoke things and do things and get special days off that the rest of us don't get.
I agree.
Right. So that's the way the secular policies work. And then the human the humanist value of turning to people to solve our own problems. Well, how easy is that to understand when we see how effective the thoughts and fucking prayers have been every time, right?
But I think it's because, in a sense, we're a humanist. To me, is the reason we do solve human problems with human means is because we realize that is all there is. They're actually doing the same thing. They are solving human problems with human means. They're just giving the glory to this magic, anthropomorphic, nothing.
Exactly. And so, and the idea of equality is ubiquitous throughout humanism. So there's that. So it's an admirable philosophy. But the reason that I don't primarily identify as a humanist, even though that's a positive belief, and I should base who I am or who I should identify, but on what I would believe in, not what I don't believe in. But the reason that I identify primarily as an atheist is because of the way religious people had lied to me and fooled me about what an atheist is, because it was a goal.
Yes.
To tell me that atheists believe in nothing, to tell me that atheists dismiss even the possibility of God, to tell me that atheists have this completely unreasonable position. Carl Sagan bought that same lie. He said, he's one of the greatest atheists. He's like the atheist every other atheist looks up to, yet he didn't identify as an atheist himself publicly, because he said that an atheist knows there is no God. An atheist knows a lot more than I do, right? And I said it's ironic that I now in the position that I will actually say now that I know that there's no God, where it wasn't necessary to say that before. If there's not evidence to support the thing, well, then we don't have anything to talk about, right? Until you can show me there's some truth to it, then there's no truth to it, right? We're done.
Right. I agree. Because in a sense, I agree. Every atheism starts at, I just don't believe you. In the sense that what you offer a God claim, and then I don't believe you. I'm an atheist. I can agree with you. Them calling it agnostic because they don't know if they should believe doesn't change that I still don't believe you. So I don't believe you, and I'm in doubt. But you still don't believe.
They deliberately classify. They would tell you that if you aren't absolutely certain that there is no God, if you can't prove that there's no God, right? If you don't know everything, then how can you know there's no God? These three lies, then you can't be an atheist. You can only be agnostic. And why would they say that? Because agnostics are never going to be, a significant population of the United States. We're never going to have voting power as agnostics.
Right.
Right? But atheists would, right? Atheist is the one position out of all positions with respect to religion. Atheism is the one that says, you all are pretending, and I'm not. I'm not buying into the game. I'm not pretending with you.
Yeah, I think that I'm an anti-religionist and an anti-theist, and I think that anti-religionist does that too. I don't value religion. I don't value religion claims. I always say the three main things I don't like about religion, it's pseudoscience, it's pseudo-history, and it's pseudo-morality. If you remove all those, then maybe I would see it as less toxic. But until then, it's toxic. It's not. It's a mental
it's also
virus.
The worst of philosophy too. If you think about all the stupidest things that historic philosophers have said, have always been in defense of religion.
Yeah.
Like Anselm, for example,
or some magical belief.
Descartes. Descartes is given credit for having said, I think, therefore I am, but that's not the only thing he said.
Yeah.
When he's talking about deep skepticism, he also talks about he got to the point where he said at his deepest skepticism he could doubt even his own existence. So he's violating the very thing that he's famous for saying. He could doubt even his own existence, but he can't. The only thing that would exist is God. So he's going to doubt that he exists, but still believe in God. Yeah. Absolute bullshit.
Yeah, that is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, and then all of the other, circular arguments routing back that, how you come up with the justification for this belief that you just got to have. Why do you just got to have it? A friend of mine expressed it when he said, he says that he's Christian because he likes to believe that, not because he thinks it's true. So why would you believe something if you don't think it's true? And this is what Bertrand Russell addressed many years ago. He said that it's he didn't call it insane, but I'll call it insane just for the moment because I can't remember the word that he used. He used like 3 or 4 different adjectives to describe how wrong it is to believe something that isn't true. Yet people do that. And I wouldn't have thought that that's possible. I mean, I thought that everybody believes whatever they did. And I thought this right up until about Y2K, as I said. I thought that everybody believed whatever they do because of some reason that convinced them. Because that's the only way anybody could believe something, right? But it turned out to be that's not the case. So I became an activist when I discovered that was not the case.
Yeah.
And people were telling me how their church had, in violation of the Johnson Amendment and everything else. I mean, their church had all voted as a block, exactly as the ministers had told them. And this coalition of different churches had all voted together in order to place certain state senators and judges and everything for this, what was later or soon revealed to be the wedge strategy, where it was they imagined some sort of a culture war. And the way they were going to win that was by quietly voting in all of these right-wing evangelicals throughout our government and then enforcing religion in schools.
And I bet they're still trying to do that.
When I saw that that's what was happening, and not just that that's what they say they were going to do, but that's what they were in fact already in the midst of doing, and were already succeeding, that's when I realized that I had to be an activist. And I had to stand up against that. So that's why I made the video series. That's why I got so adamant in all the different chat rooms and everything. And I say chat rooms. I was on discussion boards. I mean, like any place where there's any kind of action supporting religion where I could get in at all, I would get in on that and argue it. Because and here's the other naive thing. I actually believed at one point that when people in school are teaching this falsehood, that when you show them what the fact is, that they would change their mind. Oh, my bad. We'll stop teaching that.
Yeah, no.
I had people admit to me that they know it's a lie and they're going to keep teaching it anyway because it's important that for religious reasons they want to make sure that so they're admitting that they are deliberately, knowingly lying. They're deceiving other people's kids because they need them to believe.
Sickness.
Why? No, they do not need to believe. Horseshit. You know it's horseshit. You know you have to lie. Why are you saying, well, this is the absolute truth? No, you know you're lying to say that, so no, it's not.
Yeah, and what would you say of the archaeological history or prehistory evidence that you know? Which would you say is the piece that you think is the most impressive or impactful to changing or inspiring the need to change belief?
There's nothing in archaeology that I found particularly compelling. I mean, nothing that has been found. I mean, because if there's a great deal that was not found that really should have been.
Yeah.
There's that, and the only thing I can think of that has been found that kind of works again. Well, there's two things. No, one of them isn't archaeology, so it doesn't count. The city of Troy. They discovered the city of Troy.
Correct.
And that did not prove that Zeus was real.
True.
So when people say that, well, they found Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm like, yeah, they found Troy too. So what? Stories tend to take place in places that are real. Usually. I mean, on the odd occasion, you'll get a metropolis instead of New York City, but usually it's New York City.
Yeah.
And you know what? Just because New York City exists doesn't mean Spider-Man exists.
Yeah, that's like I told them. I said, well, that would be like if you think that, because when someone said, well, Damien, you have to accept the idea, and I go, why? That's like saying I have to accept the Jolly Green Giant because someone made a cartoon and then gave it a name and a whole persona that I now have to believe that vegetables are being protected by this anthropomorphic, supernatural, being, that cares about the freshness of our vegetable. I mean, it's ludicrous. That's just as ludicrous as just because your God has a little term that somehow it has any meaning at all. It's no different than the Jolly Green Giant statement.
I wish to effect a cultural change in this country. I want to be part of a cultural change wherein truth is valued. And when I say truth, I mean literally accuracy.
Yes.
So that I know we've seen this all the time. I mean, I see religious apologists or evangelicals will get up and just say any ridiculous thing they can. And sometimes even if the more controversial, the better. Like when Pat Robertson tells you that paintings can be haunted by demons, or old clothes can be haunted by demons. And when somebody else gets up here, as they recently did, and says that, as long as you're Christian, you don't need to get vaccinated because Jesus is the vaccine. So just will yourself to never have the flu. These people can say whatever the hell they want, and it doesn't matter that all of it is lies. It doesn't matter. What it should matter is not just whether we can prove that this person lied.
Right.
It is that whatever they said cannot be proven to be true. There's no, if you can't show that it's true, then there's no truth to it. And we need to know, we need to be able to say, there's no truth to what he just said. Well, it might be true, you don't know. Hey, it might be true. But the point is, we can't prove that it is. So until we can, there's no truth to it. Right?
Well, in many ways, like you said before, I mean, it is a reality deficient belief to begin with. It doesn't have enough qualities added in reality that could prove that magic is real, that the supernatural magic could be real, and that a supernatural being would be real. It's just like, nah, none of that. There's nothing all along the...
Well, as we've seen, I've seen many admissions from religious believers to the effect that, these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. So they don't care what the truth is. If you don't care what the facts are, you don't care what the truth is, right? I would like to be part of a culture that cares about accuracy.
Oh, yeah.
That understands that you don't make assertions of empty speculation as if it's fact. If you can't back it up, that's tantamount to a lie right there. But on top of that, if you actually lie, now there's a problem. Religious people will lie all day, every day, about everything, and nobody cares. But if you're an advocate of science, as I am, you have very few mistakes that can be forgiven. And if you lie, if you say something you knew was wrong, and you say it anyway to deceive someone, like I said, that teacher says they know it's wrong, but they're going to teach it anyway. You ever do that one time, your career is over, reputation gone. So if we ever act
like... So you're talking about passing a law then, right?
Yeah, if we ever act the way they always do, that's it. That's us. That's just for us.
I would agree that if they did that in some sort of a public setting, I think privately they can believe whatever they want. I don't agree that they can push it on their children, though, because I think that it's an odd thing that we have that somehow a parent has 100% religious freedom, but the child has none, and they basically have to adopt the religious freedom of their parent. Which then you are admitting the child does not have religious freedom.
Yeah.
How is that not like a human rights issue? This child has no freedom. Because like you said, I think that I agree with you that if it's taught in school, to me, that we should pass a law that you cannot do certain things in school because in a sense, this is an environment that should be about facts, should be about truth. That's like, to me, a really important thing. That's why I also personally think that there should be a disclaimer. We should get a law that shows, like Ancient Aliens has a disclaimer. This is for entertainment purposes only. Because how is some bullshit like that actually on the History Channel? And then it could be, now I'm sure. How are you sure of what? You're like jumping all over the place, not making any sense. Coming up with things that it's all about feelings. Well, I look at that and I think must be, alien.
So what you're saying is when you go to the library, if they still have libraries, as they did when I was a kid, and you have the fiction and nonfiction, and then there's the religious section, which is in the middle. And let's just take the religion section and just put it in the fiction section.
That is what I think that if we can get a thing for children, if we can get something labeled on music, that a word, which, like, say the word fuck. I always say, I don't know why people don't like the word fuck, because in a sense, it's not putting down any ethnicity, no gender. It's not, in a sense, even putting down, it's not sexism. It's not homophobia. It's not really anything. It's like saying sex. It just people don't like that term. I'm not saying that it should be used by children all the time. I'm just saying it's crazy how they'll think that's harm. Oh, the worst harm. But yet teaching them falsehoods, totally acceptable. And I think that it should be backwards. The fact that an idea that actually could run your life or ruin your life needs a warning, parental advisory label. They should put them on Bibles for all I'm concerned, because it has the promotion of slavery, torture, murder. How is that not deserving a warning label? You can still have the Bible, but don't tell me it's totally innocent.
Yeah. And then the other part of being an activist for me was realizing that every law that they try to pass to benefit Christianity's in a general state of decline. Worldwide, the United States is one of the last strongholds, and it's diminishing even here.
Yeah.
So for the rest of the world, the dominant religion is Islam, which is the fastest growing religion, and will eclipse Christianity within a couple decades at most.
Which is I need to read the Quran because of that.
Yeah. So we're going to have to change our counter apologetics arguments to a different storybook.
True.
But I realized that whatever laws the Christians lay down to benefit themselves will only be used to the advantage of the next dominant religion. And for whatever reason, the people the Christians in power now are seemingly unable to extrapolate to see, current trends and where they end. So we're diminishing and they're rising. That means they're going to pass us at some point? You would think. But, if they're thinking that these are the end times and Jesus is going to be back any minute now, maybe that's the reason they're not seeing these things. I don't know. But that's not what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking that these are the end times. I'm thinking what's going to happen is we're going to exploit all of our resources. We're going to really destroy our environment. We're going to overpopulate to death just so we can have more souls to the Lord. And then when the magic sky fairy doesn't show up, well, now we're all fucked.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen if their goals happen. We're going to have the dumbing down of America, the promotion of absolute ignorance. That's only going to make more hate, because ignorance is fond to hate.
And so wouldn't it be great to go back in time and just explain to somebody thousands and thousands of years ago what air is?
Yeah, really.
There's no spirit. You don't go anywhere when you die. So there is...
Well, that makes me think about the burning bush. I wonder if the flames and there was a wind, you're talking about wind, that God came into the bush. I wonder if the bush is, in a sense, a bush was on fire, probably because it's a volcanic area. But a bush is on fire.
It is a volcano. God appears as a volcano throughout Exodus and most of Deuteronomy. And I've actually got a number of listings for it. I mean, God was a volcano throughout the Pentateuch, except for like a couple of occasions where he shows up as more of a dust devil. But even then, because it's a column of cloud, it might have been a dust devil, might have been a tornado, might have been another continuation of the volcano. But it's very explicit about how God snorts forth all this fire and brimstone,
right,
from within himself. And you have to go. You have to follow. To go to God, to worship God, you had to follow the column of smoke by day, which is a column of fire by night. And then the burning bush is just on the mountain where the whole mountain is, the top of the mountain is on fire. I mean, it's pretty clear. They worshipped a volcano.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, I was wondering if the flames were moving because of the wind, that a person that thinks that air is magic would think that movement is God, because I remember it says that God is in the still small voice. And I was thinking, I wonder if they really meant just the air itself, because they say it's not in the...
No, this is still small voice because it's not a real voice. And so you're supposed to just hear just beyond what your ears can hear.
Oh.
You make the shit up. The more likely scenario is that when he goes up on the mountain and he's talking to a burning bush, not only is he on a volcano, but he's on a volcano in an area where there's lots of wild hemp on fire around him.
There's the burning bush. That burning bush can be awfully fun to play with.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to go.
All right, man, appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
It's been fun. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and have a great day. And
All right,
bye,
good night,
everybody.
sir.